Okay. So today we are going to be looking at the next section of Isaiah, Isaiah 7 to 12. We read the introduction to Isaiah last time, chapters 1 through 6. Basically kind of like a preview or a scope of the entire book, kind of a glimpse of the things that Isaiah is going to be talking about for the rest of the book. And that ended with an account of the call of Isaiah when he was called to be a prophet and a spokesman for God. Now we're going to read the next section of Isaiah. The next several chapters form a unit of thought. This is chapter 7 through 12. And these chapters concern the period of time in the 730s BC when Judah, which is where Isaiah was headquartered, he lived in Jerusalem and he ministered to the people of Judah. Judah was being attacked by Israel to the north and Aram, or Assyria, as we know it today, the kingdom just north of Israel. We read about this and we went over the historical section. In fact, we read Isaiah 7 and 8 a few weeks ago. When I was doing these videos earlier, when I was going through the Kings and Chronicles sections, I actually took a preview and read Isaiah chapter 7 and 8 to help give us the historical context, a bit more of it as Isaiah relates it in his book. This material was not covered in Kings or Chronicles. So I read some of this already, and I'm going to read it again now in the context of the book of Isaiah. So what we're going to be reading about here today, from Isaiah 7 to the end of Isaiah 12, is all going to be set in the context of Judah being attacked by two enemy kings, which it had already lost to. Okay, it had been fighting these kingdoms, had been losing to them individually, and now they're being attacked by the two kingdoms combined. At this time, Judah, so they're really nervous. They've already lost these kingdoms individually, so how are they going to stand up to them when they're a unit? At this time, Judah is being ruled by King Ahaz, who is a wicked king. Isaiah had the good fortune to minister under a number of good kings. You really wouldn't know that by the content of his prophecies, since he talks so much about their state of wickedness. But he actually, of the four kings that he mentioned at the beginning of his book, as him ministering under, only one of them was actually an outright evil king, and that is this guy, Ahaz. So Ahaz is the one who's being attacked by a two-kingdom alliance of Ephraim, Israel, the northern kingdom of Israel, and Syria. We call this the Syro-Ephraimite War, because Syria, or Aram, and Ephraim, Israel, are teaming up to attack Judah. Presumably, the text doesn't outright say this. We don't outright get this information put to us directly. But from contextual clues, as well as from other accounts in history, presumably the reason why Aram and Ephraim are teaming up to attack Judah and replace its king, they want to replace its king. We do get that from this text here. And presumably their goal in doing this is to install a king who would be willing to join them in their alliance against Assyria. So they're teaming up because they want to fight Assyria. And they want Judah to help them. They're trying to form an alliance of nations to fight off Assyria, which is on the move. And Ahaz does not want to do this. In fact, Ahaz wants to turn to Assyria for help. He wants Assyria to come save him from these enemy nations. And in fact, he will do that. He will make an alliance with Assyria and become Assyria's puppet state. This is not what Isaiah wants him to do. This is not what God wants him to do. This is not the message that God tells Isaiah to tell Ahaz, but that's what Ahaz wants to do. So he's rejected the Syria and Ephraimite plan to team up to fight Assyria. There's Syria and Assyria. But he's also rejected God's plan. And so that's the context that we're coming into here. Again, I've already read through chapters 7 and 8. But now we're going to read them in the context of the book of Isaiah itself. So beginning in chapter 7. When Ahaz, son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, was king of Judah. Remember, Ahaz was a wicked king, and he had all kinds of problems on top of problems, and he never turned to God for help. In fact, he refused to turn to God for help, and he just continued doubling down on refusing to turn from God for help. He was just one of those guys who was not going to turn to God no matter what. He was going to find some other solution no matter what it was. So that's who's in charge now. So while he is king of Judah, King Rezin of Aram, that's Syria. We've seen these guys for a long time. Aram has been a thorn in Israel's side for 100 plus years. Ahab fought Aram back in the 850s BC and before. So this is now the 730s BC. So this is a long century plus long feud between Aram and Israel. So King Rezin of Aram and Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, marched up to fight against Jerusalem, but they could not overpower it. Now the house of David was told, that's the kingship of Judah, that's the royal family of Judah, Aram has allied itself with Ephraim. So the hearts of Ahaz and his people were shaken, as the trees of the forest are shaken by the wind. They're afraid of this alliance. They've already lost these kingdoms individually. We can read about that in Kings and Chronicles, and now they're teaming up against them. And so they're in trouble, and they know it. Then the Lord said to Isaiah, "Go out, you and your son Shear-Jashub, to meet Ahaz at the end of the aqueduct of the upper pool on the road to the washerman's field." So Ahaz is out inspecting his waterworks, and Isaiah is going to meet him there. Isaiah already has a son at this point. Don't know how old this son is. Probably not too old, but old enough apparently to walk around and follow his dad around. And this son's name is Shear-Jashub, which is a significant name. We see it in the footnotes down here. Shear-Jashub means a remnant will return. So from the time this boy was born, Isaiah was already using him to send the message to Israel that there's going to be not only a national exile, but a remnant will return from that exile. I said before how Isaiah and his sons were something of physical, visible signs to the people of Israel, in a way similar to what Hosea was doing earlier in his ministry in the northern kingdom. Maybe not to the same degree Hosea did, but he did use himself and his sons as visible signs to the people. And we see that mainly in this section. This section of Isaiah 7 and 12, is where we mainly see that play out. So he has a son already, whose name means a remnant will return, which both prophesies a future exile and a return from that exile. Now that exile could be referring to the Assyrian exile, which the northern kingdom is going to suffer in a few years, or could be looking 100 plus years down the road to the Babylonian exile, which the southern kingdom is going to suffer 140 years or so from now. Don't really know. Okay. It could also be that at this point in time, the possibility still existed that Assyria was going to send the southern kingdom into exile too. And we read that we talked about in Jeremiah, we read that Hezekiah and the people repented in the days of Micah the prophet, which overlapped with Isaiah the prophet. They were contemporaries. And that's why that destruction that Assyria was originally apparently going to bring didn't happen, at least not to the point of exile. So it could be that at this point in time, when this sequence of events happens, an Assyrian exile for the southern kingdom was still an option that God hadn't taken off the table yet. I'm not sure. I really don't know. At any rate, Isaiah's son's name prophesies both an exile and a return from that exile. So anyway, the Lord said to Isaiah, "Go out, you and your son Shear-Jashub, a remnant will return, to meet Ahaz at the end of the aqueduct of the upper pool on the road to the washerman's field." Again, Ahaz presumably was checking his water supplies, getting ready for a fight. That's what you do when you're getting ready for ancient warfare. "Say to him," so Isaiah is to say to the king, "Be careful, keep calm, and don't be afraid. Do not lose heart because of these two smoldering stubs of firewood, because of the fierce anger of Rezin and Aram and the son of Remaliah. Aram, Ephraim, those are the nations, and Remaliah's son, that's the king, have plotted your ruin, saying, 'Let us invade Judah. Let us tear it apart and divide amongst ourselves, and make the son of Tabeel.'" Now, Tabeel means useless or worthless. I don't know if this is a guy's proper name. Probably not. No one would name your kid worthless. So this is probably a euphemism for somebody else. Who knows who this figure is that they wanted to make king? Who knows? Whoever it was somebody who was useless or worthless, good for nothing, and he was going to be a puppet king for these guys. And that's who they wanted to make king so they could tell him what to do. Presumably, they would then team up with Judah, make this guy team Judah's armies up with their armies to fight Assyria, presumably. So, let us invade Judah, let us tear it apart and divide it amongst ourselves, and let us make the son of Tabeel king over it. Yet, this is what the sovereign Lord says. It will not take place. It will not happen. For the head of Aram is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is only Rezin. I mentioned before when I read this last time that there's probably a scribal error here. This next line and the line after that should probably be flipped in their position in the text. So I'm going to go ahead and read the next verse and then back up to this previous one. So, for the head of Aram is Damascus, it's the capital city of Aram, and the head of Damascus is only Rezin, he's the king of Damascus. The head of Ephraim is Samaria, it's the capital city of Ephraim, and the head of Samaria is only Remaliah's son. Now backing up a verse, within 65 years, Ephraim will be too shattered to be a people. If you do not stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all. Now, this is being spoken probably around 735 or so BC. 65 years from now would be about 770 BC. This is probably a reference to within 65 years, Ephraim is going to go into exile, and they're going to be deported to other lands, and people are going to be brought in to settle in their land, and they're going to be interbreeding and intermarrying with other people, and their bloodlines are going to be so diluted that you're not even going to be able to recognize them anymore. That's going to all happen within 65 years, which is basically 2 or 3 generations. So not only are these nations not going to continue causing Judah any trouble within 65, which is a lifetime. I mean, some of them in Ahaz maybe not, Isaiah maybe not, but Shir-Jashub maybe. Some of the people who would have been alive at the time that Isaiah spoke this would still have been alive 65 years later to see this happen. So 65 years is not a generation, but it is a lifetime. So not only are these nations not going to destroy Judah within 65 years, within a lifetime, they're going to be so gone that you can't even find them anymore. They're going to be too shattered to be a people. If you do not stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all. Now, this is talking to a guy who had no faith. This is talking to a guy who was very determined not to put his faith in God. But God is giving him a chance here. God did not leave Ahaz without an opportunity. Again, the Lord spoke to Ahaz, through Isaiah, of course. Ask the Lord your God for a sign, whether in the deepest depths or the highest heights. So any sign you want to give him. God has told you this message. He's told you not to worry about these 2 flaming stubs of firewood. And to confirm that, so that you have no doubt about it, you can ask for any sign you want, and God will grant it to you. But Hezekiah will be asked something similar to this later on. Hezekiah will accept. He'll say, but this guy is not going to do that. Ahaz said, I will not ask. I will not put the Lord to the test. Now that sounds like a pious response. He's probably trying to make it sound like a pious response. But when God asks you to put him to the test, you're supposed to put him to the test. Okay? You're not supposed to just put him to the test on your own. I got to make sure I knew where that specific citation. Satan is going to tempt Jesus like this in the desert in the Gospels. And he's going to try to get Jesus to test God. He's going to try to twist this principle around and get Jesus to test God while he's out in the wilderness. In Deuteronomy 6, verse, and Jesus is going to respond by saying, do not put the Lord your God to the test. In Deuteronomy 6, verse 13, Moses is telling the people, fear the Lord your God, serve him only, and take your oaths in his name. Do not follow other gods, the gods of the people around you. For the Lord your God, who is among you, Yahweh, Jehovah God, is a jealous God, and his anger will burn against you, and he will destroy you from the face of the land. That's what he's doing here in the time of Ahaz and Isaiah. Do not test the Lord your God as you did at Massah. Be sure to keep the commands of the Lord your God and the stipulations of the decrees he has given you. That test that he's referring to at Massah is when they tested him wanting water. They were pushing him to the limit with all their grumbling and complaining. So there's different kind of testing. So when Isaiah is speaking to Ahaz here, he is putting the offer out there to Ahaz to ask for a test from God. God wants him to get a sign, to ask for a sign. Ahaz is saying no. He's refusing God's offer for a sign. Partially because this is prideful, and partially because he's probably already made up his mind that he wants to go with Assyria instead. He wants to make an alliance with Assyria. May already have done so. I mean, he may already have sent the messengers out to Assyria. Who knows? And he wants to put his faith in Assyria, not in Jehovah. Then Isaiah said, "Hear now, you house of David. Is it not enough to try the patience of men? Will you try the patience of my God also? Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign." So you're going to get your sign whether you want it or not, Ahaz. "The virgin will be with child, and will give birth to a son, and will call him Emmanuel. He will eat curds and honey when he knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right. But before the boy knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right," so before that happens, before he starts eating her curds and honey, "the land of the two kings you dread will be wasted." While he's still a little child, before he's old enough to know the difference between right and wrong. "The Lord will bring on you and on your people and on the house of your father a time unlike any since Ephraim broke away from Judah." That was 200 years earlier at this point. "He will bring the king of Assyria." So what's this prophecy saying? Of course, the ultimate fulfillment of this prophecy of Isaiah 7:14 is the virgin birth of Jesus Christ as recorded in Matthew and Luke, the Gospels of Matthew and Luke in the New Testament. And that is actually referring to a young woman getting pregnant despite never having had sex with a man and giving birth to a son, who is named Emmanuel, called Emmanuel. That's Jesus. So that's the ultimate fulfillment of this prophecy. But that's 700 years plus from now. Okay, Ahaz doesn't care about any of that. Here we are in 733 or so BC, and that's 733 plus years away. Ahaz, that's not going to be a sign to Ahaz. Ahaz needs a sign. Ahaz was told to ask for a sign, anything he wanted, the deepest depths, the highest heights. He refused, and God was going to give him a sign anyway. So the sign has to be something that Ahaz would understand, would be able to see and understand. Okay. And even though the fulfillment, the ultimate fulfillment of this prophecy is Jesus Christ, that's not what Ahaz hears when he hears this. The sign that Ahaz is given is a sign of an actual birth of a son to some young woman. Probably Isaiah's wife or soon-to-be wife. The birth of this son actually happens in the next chapter of Isaiah. He's the second son Isaiah has. So I talked about Shear Jashu, the son he already has. He's going to have another one, and that son will also be assigned to the people of Israel. And that's the son that's actually being talked about here, literally, in terms of, this is the sign to you, Ahaz. This young woman over here, probably Isaiah's wife, or soon-to-be wife, this young woman over here is going to have a son. She's going to conceive. She's going to be a child. She's going to have birth to a son. And before that son knows the difference between right and wrong, the land of the two kings you would dread will be laid waste. And when he is old enough, by the time he is old enough to the difference between right and wrong, there's not going to be anything left in the land to eat but curds and honey. That son will end up being Mahar Salal Hashbaz, and that's going to happen in his lifetime. So the fulfillment, and this does actually happen in 734, I think it is BC. Assyria comes and destroys Aram, the kingdom of Aram, so they're going to be gone. They're not going to be thrust to Israel any longer, and attacks Israel and takes off portions. Doesn't completely destroy it, but takes off portions of its people and its land for himself. And that's in 734, I think, BC. So this prophecy would have been uttered a couple of years before that, most likely. In that day, so we're continuing on here. Isaiah is speaking. I'm not sure if he is still speaking to the king of Israel, or king of Judah, Ahaz, or if he's just going on in the commentary and in his, I don't know, but he's still speaking. So in that day, when God sends the king of Assyria, when he brings the king of Assyria, the Lord will whistle for flies from distant streams of Egypt, and for bees from the land of Assyria. They will all come and settle. Now these aren't literal bees or flies, these are soldiers, enemy hostile forces, hostile enemy forces. They will all come and settle in the steep ravines, and in the crevices in the rocks, on all the thorn bushes and in all the water holes. And that day the Lord will use a razor hired from beyond the river, the king of the Euphrates River, the king of Assyria, to shave your head and the hair of your legs, and to take off your beards also. That's a sign of great shame. We read about this. Remember when David's men were shaved by the people of Ammon, I think it was, or maybe no, I think it was Ammon, and they had their heads and beards shaved, and that was humiliating, just so terribly humiliating to have your face shaved. And this razor is hired by Judah himself, the king of Judah. And, Ahaz wants to make this alliance, so he's going to be bringing these problems on himself eventually by hiring Assyria to come help out. It's going to backfire in the long run. In that day, so when Assyria runs through the land, a man will keep alive a young cow and 2 goats. And because of the abundance of the milk they give, he will have curds to eat. So he's not going to starve. He's not going to eat anything more than milk and curds. All who remain in the land will eat curds and honey. In that day, in every place where there had been 1,000 vines worth 1,000 silver shekels, there will be only briars and thorns. Men will go there with bow and arrow, for the land will be covered with briars and thorns. As for all the hills once cultivated by the hoe, you will no longer go there for fear of the briars and thorns. They become places where cattle are turned loose, and where sheep are running. So they're going to have not be completely destroyed, at least not Judah, but the king of Assyria is going to run over their country to the point where they're not going to have any crops to eat or any real meat to eat. They're going to have their cow, and that cow is going to produce enough milk for them that they can eat the milk and curds from that cow and get the honey from the fields. And they're not going to have there's not going to be an abundance. They're going to survive, some of them are, but there's not going to be an abundance. The days of abundance are going to be over.